LCBN television broadcasts 24/7 on UK Freeview Channel 271, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, Apple TV, Google TV, See Love World, LCBNTV.com, LifeComTV.com.
Rotimi Ashley-Dejo is the founder and CEO of Grafty.com, an online business services directory. He is also the chairman of the board of at LAC Trucks and Spares, a heavy-duty truck sales and maintenance company. He's a chemical engineering graduate of the University of Lagos and has had a 26-year career with Chevron Nigeria from 1991 till he elected for early retirement in 2017. During his Chevron career, he occupied leadership and management positions such as DV Drilling Operations Manager in Lagos, General Manager of the Drilling Department of Chevron Technology Company in Houston, Refinery Business Manager at Chevron El Segundo Refinery in California, and Turnaround Manager at Chevron Escavos GTL plant. Since retiring from Chevron, he's pursued his love of mentoring and has delivered multiple talks to high school children on a wide range of topics, including the time to focus is now and substance abuse and addiction. He is currently the member of King's College School-Based Management Committee, and he's also the current General Secretary of King's College Old Boys Association. I will welcome Rotimi. He's married. He has 2 teenage children. I'll leave you to introduce why we're here today and talk a little bit about yourself that I haven't read in your bio. I know you've got loads of things to talk about, wide and varied repertoire of life experience. So I'll leave you to introduce today's topic.
Okay, thank you very much, Lydia. It's a real pleasure to be on this program. It's a real honor. And thank you for that introduction. Just one quick correction. I did mechanical engineering. Okay. So the chemical engineers, hold your horses. I haven't decamped from mechanical.
Oh, sorry.
I am still a mechanical engineer. Okay. Like Lydia said, I had a pretty long career. 26 years in my book is long with Chevron. I started off my career, 21 years of my career was as a drilling engineer. I started off running rigs in the Niger Delta here in Nigeria. And then I've got, different experiences in engineering. Moving on to the US, I had 3 assignments in the US with my family, off and on. And I ended up, my last assignment in drilling was heading a technology department in Houston. Chevron essentially has what you might call the University of Chevron, a company that's set aside for all the specialists in different fields. So I had all the drilling PhDs in my department, about 125 strong. Mm-hmm. And then, I wanted to move on to other horizons. I decided I wanted to do something different. And I ended up going to a refinery in California to kind of just learn a little bit about the downstream side of the business for about a year before coming back to Nigeria to be a part of a gas to liquids plant that we have in Escravos. Mm-hmm. Now, in 2017, at the end of 2017, a voluntary retirement package was offered, and I took it. So at the ripe old age of 48, I decided to take early retirement from Chevron. So that's a little over 2.5 years now. I've been retired. And since retiring, I have, involved myself in the things that I love to do. It includes things such as mentoring. I love mentoring. I did a lot of mentoring while I was at Chevron, and I continue to mentor in different spheres. I've also become very busy with my old students association at King's College. As the general secretary, I'm sort of the proverbial dumping ground. Everything comes to the general secretary. So it's really keeping me busy. And it's actually a good fit, because the issue usually is, you have old boys that have a lot of passion around the old school, but they don't have the time. Well, I've got the time. So I'm devoting a lot of my energy towards improving things at King's College and with the association. I am also involved with, like Lydia mentioned, I started up about 3 years ago, a website, an online business services website called Giraffe It. You think about the giraffe, you need services. You come to my website. We're starting with Lagos, and we're going to expand to the rest of the country. So if you're looking for a plumber, you're looking for an electrician, you're looking for any kind of service, you can go to Giraffe and just Giraffe It there. So that's ongoing. I also am involved, I have a shareholding with a truck sales and maintenance company where I'm the chairman of the board. Now, Lydia and I spoke several weeks ago. Why am I here? In 2004, my life was, just tinkering along, normal. Everything was great. I had just returned from a 3-year assignment in the U.S. with my family. Everything was just looking fantastic, and I fell into a state of depression. Now, at the time, I didn't know what I was dealing with. I just thought it was some kind of extreme sadness that just wouldn't go away, and I just didn't understand why it wouldn't go away. But eventually, I got to understand that I was in a major state of depression. It lingered on, and it took me roughly 6 years to confront my denial and eventually seek help. And so I've had multiple bouts with depression since then while working. And during my last bout, I made a determination that I would help other people. I would, whenever it was expedient, I would get out there and help other people through this. A lot of people don't even understand what they're dealing with, talk less of confronting it. So we're here to talk about mental health, mental disorders, and my experience with it, and how I have handled it, and why I am speaking publicly about it. I think that kind of summarizes it.
Yes, thank you. I thought you would do a better job than me in sort of sharing that. I think a couple of days ago, I was sort of going through the internet, and I was listening to a talk somebody gave on depression, and the statistics is that it's actually one of the, or if not the major cause of mental health illness that we have now. And I think the fact that we don't acknowledge it is what is frightening. Whether it's, we have it, we like to say we have low moods, and then going all the way to what you have, which is a real proper diagnosis of being clinically, we call it clinically depressed, which is a condition that you have to manage and perhaps live with for the rest of your life. Is that true? Is that true?
Yes. Permit me to maybe get on the podium a little bit about what I suffer. And when the depression hit me in 2004, it initially felt familiar. We all experienced depressed moods. Everybody has a bad day, one at one time or the other. So your moods go into a little bit of a dip, and then eventually you feel better again. Whether the source of your low mood has gone away or it's still there, you eventually feel better because our brains are designed to help us cope with everyday stress. When we have these, events that cause us sadness or distress, our brains will deplete certain chemicals in the brain. They're called neurotransmitters. We have different neurotransmitters in our brains, and it will there's an effect that it has that creates the sad or low mood that we have. But the brain is also designed to get back to normal. It will rebalance the fluids in your brain, and you start to feel better. A lot of people don't realize, when people say mental, there are all these exotic ideas about what mental means. It's something that's not physical. As far as a lot of people are concerned, it's somewhere in the abstract. And because of that, there's a lot of ignorance and misunderstanding about what it really is. I like to tell people, for their understanding, that mental is just a subset of physical. Because everything we feel, sad, happy, exhilarated, jubilant, just name the moods. It's all physical stuff in our brains. Our brain is just another organ. And just like other organs of the body, your heart, your liver, your pancreas, your kidney, these organs sometimes malfunction, or they start to age and they don't work quite the way they used to work when you were younger. So that happens. And so, the brain, in my case, clinical depression simply means that the chemicals that are responsible for my happiness, and serotonin is one of the main ones. There are different neurotransmitters that help us feel good. For instance, when you go for a run, you do some exercise, right? There are endorphins that will be produced in your brain. They make you feel good. When you go for a run, you feel better, you feel good, you feel fantastic. It helps, cognitive activity. Neuropinephrine. There are all kinds of transmitters that help us feel good. And so clinical depression is a state where stresses come and my serotonin drops and I feel sad. And my brain is supposed to rebalance, whether it's after a few hours or after a few days or after a few weeks, it ought to rebalance, even if the cause of distress is still there. But in the case of clinical depression, it just gets stuck in that imbalance. And so I'm sad. And sometimes the cause of the stress has actually gone away, but I'm still stuck because my brain has not rebalanced my serotonin levels. In my case, when the whole depressed situation, what I call the prolonged low mood started, I had just come back from the US and I was very, very enthusiastic about work. And I had had a very successful 3-year tenure in Houston where I was teaching well control, a pretty significant critical job in the drilling world. I was delivering instruction and certifying engineers around the world, at Chevron around the world. All drilling engineers at Chevron have to be certified for well control and blowout prevention every 2 years. And I was one of the 3 guys that was doing that school, taking the school overseas and doing courses all over the world. And I came back really feeling good about myself. And I started working for a supervisor and it just didn't go so well. My performance for the first time in my career was called to question and it just wasn't familiar and I just didn't deal with it well. It just hit me and I fell into this mood. Now, here's the thing I'm saying about the causative factor has already gone. I eventually had a talk with my supervisor. Luckily in Chevron, your assessment and your promotions and all that are not determined solely by your supervisor. There is a committee that will determine your performance. You've worked for other groups, you've corresponded with, you've collaborated with other people. So at the end of the day, it's by committee. And in that year, my supervisor was essentially overruled. I got a promotion, one of the biggest promotions, in the company, grade system, where I go from being a senior supervisor to being a manager. So it was a real big step up promotion. And that happened just months after I had been having this issue with my supervisor. So the causative, the trigger of my low mood had actually gone away. And yet for another year, I was stuck in that sadness.
Yes, so the sadness remained, even though what triggered it, as we say, had been dealt with. Okay.
Right. So that's what makes it clinical, is that it's not environmental. It's not cause, people tend to default to ask you, you're depressed, what's the issue? What are you sad about? What's, and sometimes I tell them, there's nothing. My life is great. I don't understand why I'm here. My kids are great. My family is great. I've got a great job. Life is fantastic, but I'm stuck in this sad mood and I don't know how to get out of it. So it takes a little bit of explaining to people sometimes to let them know, hey, I'm not, they'll tell me, what, are you worried about money? Are you, what's the deal? And I keep telling them, it's not due to external factors. My body just can't get me back to happy.
So the brain hasn't corrected itself. It hasn't healed itself. It hasn't fed me the right hormones that can bring some moderation. And I think one thing that a lot of times people say to people who are feeling depressed, just get over it. So what you're saying is sometimes they also want to get over it, but it's just not happening. It's not like something that you can just flick a switch, for example, and then I'm feeling happy, even though everything externally is good, or there isn't anything I can pinpoint and say, actually, this is what is making me feel this way. So it's something coming from the inside. It's something that our body isn't doing naturally, because like you said, we tend to want to separate the mental from the rest of our body, but the brain is what helps the rest of the body function. And go on.
you make a good point, in the sense that, you see, I ask people when they say snap out of it, pull yourself together, you need to have faith in God. There's all these things that people say. Usually they mean well. They mean well, but they're not informed. They're ignorant of what you're going through. Now, depression and clinical depression is just one type of mental health disorder. There are different types, and there's probably many other ramifications. It may not necessarily present the way mine does. But I ask them sometimes, I say, when you have hypertension, do you just snap out of it? Do you will yourself out of it? When you become diabetic because your pancreas isn't working right, do you snap out of it? Or if you have kidney failure, do you snap out of it? Then why are you asking me, who also has an organ malfunction, to snap out of it? What's so different? Why must I will myself out of a disease, right, when all the other organs, we don't do that? So it's a lack of understanding, and I try to explain it to people from that angle.
And I think when people have faith, they almost connote this acceptance that actually I'm feeling depressed as a lack of faith, instead of actually, it has nothing to do with faith, because in my rational mind or in my being, I do believe, but at the moment something is going on for me that I, needs medication, needs exercise, maybe even a change of diet, sometimes even environment. So there are things that we can do to help. And there's a place for faith. Oh yes.
There's a place for counseling that can help people feel better. Absolutely. But the notion that some people have, which is a one-stop solution, not the way it works. You can have your faith, but still you're dealing with a physical ailment that requires medical attention.
I think, and this wanting to leave it somewhere that is unaccessible and leaving the responsibility entirely on God, to me, doesn't work. You know, we have to do what we need to do to remain
You can,
well.
yeah. We can do both.
Yes,
Like
yes,
you know,
that's what I'm
Americans
saying.
like to
Yeah.
say, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can pursue your faith, go pray, seek the face of God to help you get over the way you're feeling, but at the same time, go see a doctor. If you have cancer, for instance, sufferers of really terminal diseases, they don't just sit around praying. You shouldn't. You should pursue your faith and at the same time pursue, because your miracle may be in science.
Yes. And I say to people, when people say that it's God who has given the scientists the wisdom to know what to do, whether it's by medication, whether it's by surgery. All of these things are things that God gives people, you know, the ability to do. So when we want to negate one for the other, then it just doesn't work. Okay.
Right.
You know, you sent me an article that I think you had done, and what I found interesting was the topic. You know, I think it's called "Emerging from the Shadows." Did you pick that topic? I mean, did you title it that way?
The publisher Adeswa Onyenokwe, she's the publisher of Today's Woman, and she was doing a series on mental illness, and she wanted to have a male perspective, and we got introduced. So it was all her doing. Let me put it that way. She was the progenitor of that whole the whole the title. The theme, that was. I was just a willing follower.
but it in some way it's apt to describe when one is feeling depressed and having to emerge from the shadow of it. I think I just liked the title. And there's a quote you say, it's not really sadness, it's just nothing. It's emptiness and it's excruciating nothingness. It's just there. Do you want to maybe explain that statement?
So, what I'm describing is unique to my own experience. So, you know, I don't want to give the impression that this is the way it necessarily will manifest for everyone who suffers depression. For instance, you know, some of the classical signs of depression are, you know, a lack of enthusiasm, particularly for the things that you have historically loved doing, you know, an apathy towards, you know, your usual day-to-day activities, a reluctance to interact with humans. I say humans sometimes so that, you know, people sometimes find some solace in pets, but, you know, you don't want to talk to people. People call you, you don't answer your phone, loss of appetite, unable to sleep. Now, in my case, I slept excessively. So I think it manifests for different people in different ways. Excessive sleeping or lack of sleep, loss of weight, loss of libido. I mean, everything. And then a lot of the things that should even help you, such as, you know, interacting with other people, are some of the things that you actually oppose, you're kind of reluctant to do. Getting exercise, you know, take a walk, get in the sun. These are the things that should ordinarily lift a person's mood. But it seems like it's so hard to do when you're in this state. Now, when I talk about nothingness, my wife went through this journey with me, and for the most part didn't really understand what I was feeling. I could not properly articulate what I was going through to her. And it gave her a lot of frustration because she just didn't know. Why, for instance, would an able-bodied man who's, you know, able to talk, who's got energy in his bones, has eaten, why can't he, for instance, just get out of the bed, walk to the door of the bedroom, go downstairs, and just play with his kids. Why? What, is there, what kind of force is keeping such a guy from just doing that? And it was hard for me to explain or articulate what I was feeling. Now, when I went to see my therapist with her, my therapist once tried to explain to her what I was feeling. And she said, the analogy she gave was, consider or try to imagine losing a child. My wife said, well, hard to imagine, but I can just imagine the extreme grief that comes with that. And then my therapist said, try to multiply that feeling by 10. I don't know if you can do that, but it gave a picture of some extreme form of sadness. And I say it's not even sadness, because usually when you're sad, typically you know what you're sad about, right? You're sad about the loss of a loved one. You're sad about the lack of money. You're sad about failing an exam, or, getting a bad assessment at work. But in my case, I wasn't sad about anything. In fact, I was happy about everything in my life. But the feeling within me, can you imagine lying in bed day in, day out and thinking nothing? In other words, I'm not thinking about the job. I'm not thinking about my friends. I'm not thinking about my family. I'm not thinking about the things I want to do. I'm not thinking about, great experiences in the past. I'm just blank. Every now and then I'll watch TV. Yeah, I can follow TV. But most of the time I'm lying there staring at the wall, staring at the ceiling, and there's nothing in my mind. I'm just blank. I'm just there, unable to function. That's why I call it nothingness, because sad is usually sad about something.
That's usually.
But in my case, I was just there, comatose almost. It was like in a coma, but aware.
So there's some part of you that is aware of, your environment, but the rest of you just cannot connect. There's almost a disconnect between environment.
In fact, the thoughts going through my mind usually would be, why me? Why, what kind of a hole am I in, and why am I here? I see kids playing on the road, they're street urchins, they're happy. I see people whose life situations, frankly, are not as great as mine, and they're happy, and they're going about their lives, and they're having fun and all that, and I'm just stuck here, unable to function, and I just don't get it. And so those are the kind of thoughts that go through my mind. And I know we're probably going to talk about suicide later, but you see, when people commit suicide, it's such a permanent, such a final thing to even consider. The fact that you're even thinking about it means you've been pushed to such an extreme of despair that you just want to end the feeling. Sometimes people talk about suicide as something, the person must be selfish. You're not thinking about your loved ones. You're not. But you see, it's far from it, at least in my experience. It's trying to get away from the way you're feeling. The feeling is so excruciating. It's so desperate that you just get tired of it eventually, and you just want it to stop. And the only way you think you can make it stop is by ending your life.
Which is true. And also sometimes the person who is suffering feels they're a burden to other people. And this is the only way I can end my pain and end being a burden to those people around me who can't really understand why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, why I'm in so much despair, why I can't see life as being enjoyable or even bearable, because it's not every time that life is enjoyable, but it's bearable. We want to make it through. We know there is hope on the other side. But this person is sitting in despair and thinking, I will never make it out of this darkness. I will never make it out of the pit. I will never be able to feel normal again, because there is, something about us feeling normal and feeling willing and able, not even necessarily happy, but just able to engage with the rest of the world. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to sort of move a little bit and talk about being a man and what the male ego, what part it plays in accepting or denying this condition.
Men. There's a book that says, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and the book kind of looks at the both the evolutionary. I don't know. I know some people don't believe in evolution, but there's a developmental paths that men follow in their antecedents. What is the role of the man in a family, for instance, in the family unit? And what is the role of the woman? And so based on those antecedents of, our different roles, we have developed in different ways. So we're very different. Men and women are very different. And so for whatever reason it is, men have a much bigger ego than women. Pride has driven more men into destruction than women by far. And, I don't know whether it has to do with the child rearing need. Women have to really put away all their pride and really get down to business to raise their kids. Historically, that's, you can't get stuck in some kind of pride standoff when you've got kids to raise and a home to run. But men can afford all that nonsense, right? So we have bigger egos generally than women. And one of the reasons why Adeswa, Today's Woman, wanted to do a series and insert a man in it is she wanted to at least get the perspective of a man with our big egos. Now, I may not be the best candidate because I think relative to my men folk, I think I have a below average ego. I tend to be a more conciliatory, diplomatic, slow to lose my temper kind of person. So in the category or in the department of pride and ego, I'm probably not the best candidate. There's probably a lot of men that are bigger in that department than I am. And I recognize that. I've known that for years. But still, the fact is, we don't accept, men don't accept vulnerability very easily. Things that we don't understand, we don't confront easily. Like I know we had a conversation where I told you it was my wife that pushed me to say, look, we can't keep going this way, man. This is going nowhere fast. We got to do something different. Men are very reluctant to confront their weaknesses. It's just there. It's intrinsic. And so we need help. Men would not cry in public if they can help it. But men cry. They may not physically shed tears, but they may die inside over issues. And so when it comes to mental disorders, men are more likely to confront the issue in denial. They go drinking, they go partying, they start engaging in extreme activity, or they just disappear. Men will generally not seek help. It's just the same way in general. I'm sure you will agree with me that when it comes to seeking medical attention, men are less likely to seek medical attention for an ailment. In fact, I remember when we were raising babies, my wife, every little thing with the baby, she wants to go to the clinic, and I'm like, come on now. I mean, it's probably just a temperature. It'll pass. Just go put some cold water on it. So we're less interventionist about things that betray weakness, and so it's something to be aware of when it comes to mental health. Those around people who may be suffering mental health, if it's a guy, he's going to deny there's anything wrong. You've got to be really persistent and probe to get at the issues, because men are generally not going to reveal any chink in their armor.
Because there's this thing about them being the hero and the savior and the, you know,
Machismo.
and I think I don't know if it was in our conversation where we were saying that I think particularly the black man is seen as quite strong physically. So he presents in that way. And for him to sort of now say, you know what, I'm not coping very well and I can't do this by myself. It takes an even bigger man to agree that they're not who they are or who we want them to be. I had this conversation with a young man. He was saying that actually sometimes we give you all this perception. You know, we're expecting so much more, you know, from you, that it's difficult for a man to say, I'm not coping, I need help. I think we need to go to the doctor. So your wife was really instrumental in pushing, because she'd done, I think, all she could in her own strength to help.
Right.
What would you say to... Go on, talk about that, then I'll ask the next question.
It was really, you know, for someone, when you're living with someone who seems to be descending into a pit, and it's almost like a spiral. It's just, you know, it's a different thing if they're at a certain, you can see them in a bad place and they're just there in that bad place. And it doesn't seem to be getting any better, but it doesn't seem to be getting any worse. That might even be a little bit easier to cope with and say, well, eventually they'll snap out of it. But when you see someone who seems to be spiraling even deeper and deeper into an abyss, you know, as a spouse, family member, or friend who has to interact with this person on a daily basis, it's excruciating and it's frustrating, especially when you don't understand what's happening. And you must, you know, the best thing you can do is to seek help. And when the person in question doesn't even want to broach the issue, it becomes more alarming. I mean, my wife is telling me, now we need to do something. I'm like, no, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. I just kept saying I'll be fine, but I wasn't fine. And she was seeing it every day. I was missing work. I mean, I was a general manager, for God's sakes, and I was missing sometimes 2-3 days at a stretch, giving excuses at the office and so on. So, yes, my wife eventually pushed me. And in fact, I initially in 2005, I believe it was, during our second assignment in the U.S., she, you know, it got so bad. I was working a rotational job. I was working 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. I was working on a drill ship in the Gulf of Mexico, and I was working back to back with another gentleman. And so my 2 weeks on the rig, away from home, when I came home on time off, this is the time I'm supposed to be able to, you know, really spend time with my family. My kids were the ages of 5 and 3 at the time. This is just lovely time when, you know, daddy's like the world champion in everything, you know, but I get home and I just stay in my room on my bed for almost my entire 2 weeks. And so it was just constant. I mean, my wife was just constantly on my case. And eventually she pushed me. I went to see a GP. He kind of did an assessment. This wasn't a specialist I saw initially, but he gave me a basic standard antidepressant. I think it was Prozac or something. And that's the one I brought home. I took one pill. And after talking to a buddy of mine who basically said, look, you know, once you start on drugs, man, addiction and all these things come on, you start getting dependent on this stuff. This is not who you are. I bought it. I bought the idea. I decided, you know, this is for those people. This isn't for me. I'm not one of those people.
I'm not one of them.
And I just emptied the thing in the toilet and flushed it away. I said, I will beat this myself. And so there ensued another 3 or so years of denial. Before I eventually had no choice but to confront my demons.
Yes, yes.
and go get proper professional help.
So also just listening to you, and another male friend says to you, actually, this is the road to nowhere. This is the great road to no return if you start on this medication. And just going back to what we talked about, if you had said to him, oh, my doctor said I have diabetes and I have to take a pill every day, would he have told you this is the road to nowhere?
Probably not. And here again is what I say about ignorance and lack of information. We don't understand these things, so we fear them. And that's the normal human response to anything we don't understand. Fear and anxiety comes in, and we just want to avoid it. So avoidance is our response to ignorance.
To what we don't
understand. Yes. And, when I think about it, the large majority, because I developed a small group of confidants, a few cousins of mine that I'm really close to, a few close friends, my brother-in-law, so I had a few people that kind of knew what was going on. And among all those, the attitude of the men generally was, what is the matter with you, man? Your life is fantastic. Snap out of it already. That's a summary of the guys. The women are more conciliatory. They're more, trying to understand and just trying to cheer me up and all that. But the men were more dismissive. I remember a friend of mine saying, what's depression in Africa? What are you talking about? What's this depression stuff? My friend, Taragiri, and snap out of it, get your life moving, man. Stop all this nonsense. So there's an approach from men generally of the macho way. Get your act together. We're men. We're hunters. Our job is to look after our family. We can't afford to broach any weakness, and you can't afford this nonsense. So snap out of it and get back on the road looking after your family. That's what men do. So that's the general.
Yeah. How can the protector and provider be in this state? And I think that's what's really crucial about people like yourself sharing your journey, sharing your truth, because it normalizes it. It gives information. It lets people know that this can happen to you, but there is a way we can continue life. We can confront it. We can accept. If we have to take medication, then so be it, and do that so that life can continue, instead of having episodes where one is feeling so despair. And I think it does lead to things like suicide. It can even lead to a different type of mental health if we leave it remaining unchecked. So I think that's what's important about people like you actually sharing what you have experienced and how life is continues for you. We talked a bit about your wife. What about the children? How was it for them then? How is it for them now?
So maybe before I talk about the kids and the family, maybe, the point you brought up about normalizing the scourge, I think, permit me to expand on that a little bit.
Yes, of course.
Because I think it's important. For people, first of all, there is a stigma around mental illness. It's not just in Africa, it's
worldwide.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
In Africa, it's even worse because we have all these superstitions and all these beliefs and all this stuff. If something is wrong with you, then somebody in your village is causing it, right? That's the African default, and you need deliverance. That's just the first step. So you need deliverance. First, that's the default. And so for us, I experienced the feeling of this is not who who I am. I'm not one of those people that has mental issues. I'm not sick and I'm not mad. So I reject it. And that's the general approach, the general reaction people have.
The first reaction.
Even though, yes, it's denial and like, I'm not one of those people. Surely I'm not one of those people. I reject it. You know how we in Africa we say I reject it. Anyway, so but the more and you see what kind of exacerbates it is the fact that everybody's hiding. So it's easy for a person who's experiencing these those and who doesn't see a lot of other people experiencing it other than the mad people on the streets who have gone completely crazy. Those are the images they see. So if something that is looking similar to what those people are experiencing is happening to me, it means I'm going to wind up like that. There's a bit of a co-joining of a thought process that makes you feel like, no, I'm certainly not one of those mad people roaming the streets. No. And that is because the large majority of other people that are suffering mental illness are hiding it. So you don't see that. They may even be in your family and you don't even know. And so it seems like this this thing that happens to just a few people who wind up on the road roaming the streets and they're just lunatics and they've completely lost it. And nobody wants to be associated with that. And so when people who are normal people, such as myself, come and speak out and say, look, guys, I've been going through this thing for years. And we have more and more people who are continuing to live their lives and can reveal that, hey, yes, I do have depression. I do have bipolar disorders. I do have manic depressive disorders. And I've been dealing with it for decades. Then it starts to, as you say, normalize the whole idea of mental illness. And people start to accept it the same way they accept heart disease, kidney disorders, and so on and so forth. It's just another organ not working right.
Not working right.
And the other thing I did, I told you that I made a decision because when I was in my last episode lasted a year and a half. It wasn't just the longest period of continuous depression where I missed a lot of work, but it was also the period where I was informed enough to get on my medication and start seeing my doctor very early in the game. So I got in, I started having the feelings. I saw my therapist, I started my medication, and yet it didn't go away. And it was the scariest thing for me because I thought, wow, if this thing doesn't work, I'm stuck in this thing, man. This is going to be my life. So it was a really scary episode for me. And while I was in that hole, a friend of mine who a few years back had been in the U.S. with me. His family was on assignment in the U.S. and we're very good friends. Confided in me while we're talking that he had suffered depression as well while we were in the U.S. together, and I had no idea for a whole year. And I tell you, the therapeutic effect of speaking with someone who knows what you're feeling is incomparable. I felt good being able to talk to someone. It was just not like talking to any of the other folks who were just those who were trying to understand, those who were trying to, and even those who were just dismissing it. Talking to someone who could relate to what I was saying and what I was feeling was so much therapy. It made me feel so much better. I made up my mind. I said, this is going to be my life's work. I'm going to make myself available to people who suffer this stuff and make myself available to talk to them, counsel them, and encourage them to get help also. I use myself as an example that they can lean on and say, well, after all, Ashley, he used to be a GM. He's a pretty solid guy, and he suffered this stuff. Then who am I? And he got help. I better go get help too. And I didn't know when I was going to be able to come out, but I did not want the negative stigma, the negative,
the narrative
potential
mm-hmm.
to affect my career, because that's usually the issue. That's one of the issues, is that once word gets out that this guy is mad, even now that I have come out, I'm hearing a few people talking about, wow, so that guy was mad. He was not well when he was over here at Chevron. I get that, and I expected that, and it's okay now. But I didn't want it to happen while I was in there, and it would start to affect my career progression, and
LCBN television broadcasts 24/7 on UK Freeview Channel 271, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, Apple TV, Google TV, See Love World, LCBNTV.com, LifeComTV.com.